I was only 1 year old when fate took me away from the warmth of my mother's embrace. At that time, my grandmother took me in with her loving care. My father did not remarry because he was aware of the traditional behavior of my stepmother. After my grandmother, my sister Asia took care of the younger siblings. When Asia got married, her place was taken by my sister Saima. My father firmly believed that it was better for daughters to be married off as soon as possible. At the time, Saima was still in her matriculation, but a good proposal came for her. She wanted to continue her studies, but without considering her wishes, her marriage was fixed. On the day of the wedding, I saw moisture in her eyes, and I understood that she was saddened by the thought of our separation. From the beginning, we had been taught that a girl's role was to remain silent, especially when it came to marriage matters. Girls had no right to speak. Saima wanted to use her voice, but out of respect for our father, she kept her silence and sacrificed her emotions. However, she could not bear this inner turmoil, and her desire to continue her studies remained unfulfilled. This took a toll on her heart. The wedding date was set, and Saima became quieter. During this time, I found her praying a lot, staying up at night, and crying to Allah. There were only 15 days left for her wedding when tragedy struck. Our father met with an accident. He was severely injured, but by Allah's grace, his life was saved. He spent a long time in the hospital, and because of this, Saima's wedding was postponed. Before our father had fully recovered, Saima developed a fever. We waited for her to recover, and during this period, my soon-to-be brother-in-law visited several times. He appeared to be a good man, and Saima admired his good fortune. He was not only handsome, but also held a good position. We hoped it was just a minor fever, but it grew worse and her illness became more severe. We sought treatment from many specialists, but no one could identify the cause of her condition. Eventually, she succumbed to her illness. The hopes of seeing her as a bride remained unfulfilled. For us, it was a huge loss, and for Faiz, it was a tragedy. He had become so attached to us that he could not sever his bond with us. Even after Saima's death, he continued to visit our house. I would see his sadness and pray that he would find his happiness. It's true that sometimes prayers are answered. One day he came with his parents, and they asked for my hand in marriage. My father asked for some time to think, as he did not want to miss a good match. A few days later, they came back, and my father said that he wanted to marry off my son first, because after Noreen's departure, the house would feel empty. They agreed to wait, and they said they would return to fix the date after my brother's wedding. My brother was younger than the three of us and still studying. I had started seeing Faiz as a brother-in-law, so the thought of marrying him troubled me. However, I did not have the courage to speak in front of my father. Time passed, and after 3 years, Faiz's parents came to my father with a request to fix the marriage, while the actual wedding could happen later. My father agreed, and my marriage to Faiz was arranged. Now I was married to the man whom I had once seen as my brother-in-law. I mentally prepared myself, understanding that Faiz would be my life partner. What good would it do to remain entangled in confusion? My brother proved to be very capable. After completing his education, he was awarded a scholarship to study abroad. My father then realized that Faiz's parents were exceptionally honorable people, and they had shown incredible patience. He thought that since Ali was going abroad, he might not return for a long time, and it wouldn't be right to keep me waiting for such a long period. It was time to let me go, so my father invited Faiz's family and set the wedding date. Finally, I became Faiz's bride. My heart raced, wondering how Faiz would accept me. But with his loving nature, this phase too passed, and we began to love each other after being united in marriage. The image of my late sister, which had been imprinted in my mind, was now covered by the reality of my new life, and I started living a happy life with my husband. Our exuberant love was not appreciated by my in-laws. They constantly advised Faiz, saying, "Son, women are unreliable. There's no need to shower too much affection on them. A woman should be like the shoe under your foot, not on your head." During this time, Faiz's job transferred him to another city. He comforted me, saying, "I will bring you once I settle things there." I couldn't imagine life without him, and likewise, he couldn't live without me. After a few days, he managed to arrange accommodation and returned to take me with him, despite his parents' objections. We moved there, and our days and nights were filled with love and joy. It was a happiness I had never experienced before. Those years felt like living in paradise. During this period, we visited my in-laws frequently. I always urged them to come live with us, but they refused. Every time I visited them, my mother-in-law would say, "It's been so many years since your marriage, and you still don't have children. We don't know why we've made another alliance with this family. One daughter died and the other is barren. We don't know if your children will ever be born." Sometimes she would even try to convince my husband that if I didn't conceive in the next couple of years, he should marry again. Faiz took his mother's words lightly and would respond, "Mother, children are a blessing from Allah. Eventually, Allah will hear our prayers. Despair is disbelief, and the world stands on hope." I was terrified that Faiz might listen to his mother and marry again, leaving me behind. Every time I went to my parents' house, I also sought treatment, but it seemed that Allah's will didn't allow me to conceive. One day Faiz said, "I'm not going to visit my parents anymore because they are pressuring me to marry again. When I refuse, they get upset." Hearing this, I broke down in tears. I was afraid he would leave me under pressure. Faiz reassured me, saying, What are you saying? I could never think of leaving you. Who would leave their life partner? Can the heartbeat ever be separated from the heart? Don't ever think of such things again. I can't imagine my life with anyone but you. If I were to marry again for the sake of children, I would never have spent 7 years with you. I would have remarried long ago. With his reassurance, I felt comforted. I was grateful that my husband was loyal to me, and I no longer had to worry. My mother had passed away when I was a child, so I always thought of my mother-in-law as a second mother. I believed I would receive a mother's love from her and give her the same love in return, but that was just a dream. I kept hoping for this, but it never came true. When Ali returned after completing his studies, my father wrote to me saying, "So, I am setting the date for your brother's wedding. Come home, and we will start preparing for it." I gave the letter to Faiz, and he said, "Yes, you should definitely go. Let me know when, and I'll accompany you." Around the same time, my in-laws came to our house for the first time in a long while. I was happy and took extra care to welcome them, but my mother-in-law was unhappy about my brother's wedding. She said, "We were waiting for your brother's proposal to come to our house, but now the situation is completely different." My father-in-law also scolded my husband, asking him why he hadn't sent a proposal for their daughter. Faiz's parents told him, "Why are you sitting with your wife? You need to take her to her parents' house. A girl who can't go to our house shouldn't stay in ours either." I said to Faiz, "There was no awkwardness between you and me. If you had told me, I could have talked to my father, but now it's too late." Faiz replied, "Forget all of this. Why didn't you care for my younger sister? You should have shown concern for her too." Hearing these words, I became upset. The joy of my brother's wedding seemed to vanish into thin air. Seeing me distressed, Faiz said, "Prepare yourself. I'll take you to your parents' house. Your father is waiting for you urgently." I told him, "Your mother and father have come after a long time. I can't leave them now. Who will take care of them?" When my father-in-law heard this, he said, "No, you should go. It's fine. It's a moment of happiness, and we are not guests, but family here. Son, take your wife to her father's house." He said this in such a way that I felt he was speaking with love and sincerity. Still, I told Faiz, "I don't feel right about leaving them alone." He responded, "Don't worry, they've given you permission, and they understand your situation." I went to my parents' house, but when the wedding cards were printed, my father said, "Daughter, you should go and personally give the invitation to your in-laws so they feel respected." When I went to deliver the cards, a strange scene awaited me. There was an elderly woman and 2 middle-aged women talking. They were saying, "So what if the girl's uneducated? She comes from a good family and will be happy." I thought they were talking about my younger sister's marriage proposal. I didn't think much of it, but Faiz's demeanor seemed different. He looked at me as though his eyes were betraying him. I asked him to take me to the market for some shopping, but he replied, "Take your brother with you. I have some work to do. You can shop, and Salman will drop you at your parents' house. I'll join you later." 4 days before my brother's wedding, Faiz came to me and said, "A friend of mine is getting married, and he needs a gold set. I'll return it in a week. You have 3 or 4 sets? Wear one of those." I gave him the set as I trusted him completely. But after he left, I started feeling uneasy as though I had lost something precious. I thought perhaps it was because I had given him the set. My mind kept racing with worries. I wasn't a suspicious person, but my trust in Faiz was so complete that no other thought came to my mind. On the day of the wedding, my father received a call from someone who told him that Faiz had married someone else. My father didn't believe it at first, but then became concerned. He decided to visit Faiz's family to confirm, but he kept quiet about it, thinking that this was the first time there was happiness in our home, and he didn't want to disrupt the wedding. So he decided to let the wedding proceed and then confirm the rumor later. This news was kept from me as well. While I was happily preparing for the wedding, the next day during the henna ceremony, I was informed that Faiz wasn't coming due to health reasons. I thought perhaps he wasn't well, but his parents came for the ceremony. Faiz promised to pick me up the following week. But when that week passed and he didn't come, I asked my father to take me to Faiz's house. My father replied, "Be patient. He will come to get you when he's ready." But after much insistence, my brother said, "You should listen carefully. Your husband has married again." I couldn't believe my ears. I secretly called Faiz and told him what my brother had said, asking him if there was any truth to it. He confessed, "Yes, my parents forced me into this marriage, but I'll divorce her in a few days. Don't take it to heart. I'll come and take you soon." My father asked me, "What do you want? Do you want to accept the co-wife, or do you want a divorce?" I replied, "I don't want a co-wife, and I don't want a divorce either. In that case, you will have to return to your home, and Faiz will have to keep his second wife with his parents while I stay with him." Faiz agreed to this condition. He left his new wife with his parents and brought me to live with him. We spent a few days together, but then Faiz went back to his parents' house. He returned after 4 days and later arranged for another transfer to a city close to his parents. He would spend 4 days there and 3 days with me. When he was with his second wife, I would spend my days alone. I could see Faiz was becoming distant, and that feeling consumed me. It was as if he no longer needed me. When my father fell ill, I had to go to my parents' house. Faiz told me he would come back to take me after a few days, but he didn't. I kept waiting, and a whole year passed. He became a father of a son, and his family was complete. In his happiness, he forgot me. He became distant and disconnected from me, but I couldn't forget him. I lived alone in my father's house while my brother and his wife were abroad. My elder sister had her own happy home. Meanwhile, I still lived with the hope that Faiz would come back for me. People advised me to give up on him, saying he had 3 children now. But my heart couldn't let go. Even after 20 years, my hope hasn't broken.